Welcome to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Dame, holistic nutrition coach and speaker. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. We're being joined today by a really special guest and a near and dear friend of mine. Samantha Gladish is here. Hi, Sam. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Good. Well, I'm so excited to have you here. I mean, we first met, has it been 2 or 3 years now since I interviewed you for the Quit Sugar Summit?
I feel like it must be 3. It's gotta be longer than 2. I actually don't know. I'm like,
it's all a blur.
Yeah, it is all a blur.
Last couple of years have been a blur for everybody, right?
Totally.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm so grateful. And I know I've been on your podcast and it's been a long time coming to get you on here. And I'm really excited about your story and sharing that with my audience and just having this conversation today. So let's just dive in. And why don't you start off by sharing a little bit of your background? You know, what got you into obviously the really powerful work that you're doing this day and age? And, you know, what's your story that's gotten you here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like so many of us get into the health and wellness space because of our own health struggles. And so I mean, going back to when I was even just a little girl, like I was always innately interested in food and nutrition and like very connected to nature. So it was no surprise that I kind of got into this field. So I went to U of T, University of Toronto, and it was really partway through there where I was like, because I was going to university to become a teacher, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. And then I learned that like you could actually have like nutrition can actually be your career. So then I totally like, you know, switched and made a pivot and started to just dive into nutrition. And really from a health perspective, I mean, I always had issues with like my cycle, like I was always regular, but I had a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort, just a lot of PMS symptoms in like my teens and my early 20s. And I was put on the birth control pill, you know, that was suggested to me from my doctor, as it is suggested for so many women who are dealing with PMS symptoms and issues. And so, you know, I went on the birth control pill for about 8 years. And then it was in my early 20s when I really started to dive into more of nutrition and understanding a little bit more about root causes, that I was learning how detrimental the pill actually was to my hormones and my cycle. And then that's when I actually started to dive into studying nutrition, and I went to nutrition school. And I will never forget, kind of in that first month, we were, you know, did a deeper dive into hormones. And then that's when I like just cold turkey stopped taking the birth control pill. And I mean, the thing is, at that point, I was already in a place where I was really nourishing my body well and on supplements and kind of the whole deal. So to kind of go cold turkey off of the pill made sense for me at that point. And luckily I got my cycle back, no problem. 30 days later, it came back, no problem. And so that was kind of the one area that got me really interested in the health and wellness space, was like PMS and the birth control pill, and like really wanting to support women with their hormones and their cycle. And then I started a business, started my holistic wellness business and started coaching. And then in 2017, I got diagnosed with autoimmune Hashimotos. And that kind of was a whole other journey of, you know, diving now into autoimmunity and thyroid health and metabolic health, and just really understanding that and trying to, you know, now support that. And then of course, started attracting so many women that had autoimmune conditions, and started working with so many, you know, women in the autoimmune space. And yeah, that's kind of what brings me here in terms of really loving to dive into this topic and chat about thyroid health, adrenal health, metabolic health. It's kind of been my thing for quite a few years now.
Yeah. And you definitely know your stuff. And thank you so much for sharing that little backstory. I didn't know some of those pieces of your story. So this is always fun to kind of hear and connect more with you. And I would love to dive more a little bit into like Hashimotos, because I know this is a big part of like your story and your journey. And it's, you know, something I actually don't know much about. And I know we kind of hear about it out there. So what is Hashimotos, and like, how would you know if you have it? Like, give us kind of the overview, because I know a lot of listeners maybe as well have heard of it, but don't really understand what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just kind of explain a little bit of what was showing up for me and what kind of led me down this path to, go do the right testing and whatnot. And so, as you know, being an entrepreneur, it's stressful, right? And we love what we do, but there's still stress that comes with that. So, trying to grow your business and work with clients and basically take on all of the things, like it's really stressful. And so in 2017, like I said earlier, when I officially got diagnosed, like that year I think when things really started to symptomatically show up for me. So basically what ended up happening for me was, well, my sleep was really off. I was really, really tired and I could not sleep. Like I would go to bed and I'd be up like every other hour throughout the night. And then I was gaining a little bit of weight. I had more headaches and like, I just felt this like puffiness in my body. Like it's almost like I could feel the inflammation in my body, like literally. And then I will never forget this one day I went to the gym and I went to go lift weights and I went to grip the weights and like literally couldn't grip. Like I had this issue with my grip and I was getting these pains in my hands. And in that moment, I was like, oh, I have autoimmune Hashimoto's. Like I actually just knew it because of working with so many women over the years and hearing about all these just crazy symptoms that arise. There was just some sort of like intuitive, voice that came through. And I was like, this is autoimmune Hashimoto's. And so to really confirm that diagnosis, I went to my naturopath and I had them run a full thyroid panel. And so if you go to your medical doctor and they're testing your thyroid, they're really only testing your TSH, which is just one very small piece of the puzzle. You need to get the full panel. And that's your free T4, your free T3, your reverse T3, your anti-TPO and your anti-TG, your antibodies. So I did the full thyroid panel and sure enough, my antibodies were pretty high where they were like well over 600 and you pretty much want them under like 40 or 35 or something like that. And so that's typically what the diagnosis is, testing the antibodies. And if the antibodies are high, it's typically a sign of Hashimoto's. And what that means is that your immune system is actually attacking your thyroid gland. And so just like other autoimmune conditions, obviously there's an immune component to that. And it just means that your immune system is attacking certain tissues in the body. So like rheumatoid arthritis, it's attacking the joints, right? So it's, and there's, hundreds of autoimmune conditions that we know of nowadays, and it's so much more prevalent. And so that's really what that means is my immune system was attacking my thyroid. And about 95% of women that have low thyroid function, so hypothyroidism, it's typically due to autoimmune Hashimoto's. There's typically an autoimmune component involved there. So you wouldn't know unless you got the proper testing. So I really encourage to get the proper testing, even if it means you have to pay for it out of pocket, because unfortunately going to our medical doctor, they're only going to test the TSH and it can be like pulling teeth. I've been through that journey numerous times and I was just like, I need these answers. And so I just went straight to my naturopath to do it. And I actually think there's a lot of places now online, you can get like at-home test kits. Like there's all kinds of different options nowadays. But definitely paying for that test is going to be really, really important. And that will help to kind of direct you and provide you some more insight. And the thing to keep in mind, though, is that yes, your immune system is attacking the thyroid, and most people just go and try and work on the thyroid, but it's actually an immune issue. And you really have to support the immune system. And we know that your immune lives in your gut. And so it also means addressing the gut. So it's very multifaceted. It's not just taking Synthroid, as most women are prescribed from their doctor, either levothyroxine or Synthroid for their thyroid issues. And, initially it might help with some symptoms, but that's not solving why it showed up in the first place.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for explaining that. That's so good for me to even hear and understand. And something that, like so you touched on so many really great things there in really pointing out how our testing systems, right, aren't as great as they could be. And I'm going to echo that
Totally.
back as well. Like these
Yep.
things are worth the investment, right? To have an understanding of where you're at, thyroid health and other areas as well, of course, in your body. So, and I love that you mentioned, I think that like, I want to pull that out because I know this is really important for everyone listening to hear, right? Is that, you know, when we have a quote unquote problem in one area of our body, often we just focus on that one area, right? Instead of
Right.
going, where is this actually coming from? And this is why I
Totally.
love your approach and what you do. It's all, you know, let's look at the back end, right? The root cause. I know that we talk a
Yes,
lot about that here on the podcast, right?
for
That's my
sure.
passion too. So we have to understand. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that, right? This is about like, where is that actually coming from? And I'm curious as you were talking, you know, because I know how your mind works and that you were probably thinking these questions as well. Do you have for yourself like any idea of like why this showed up for you? You know, what was like, you know, when you look back at your life, like were there factors that
Totally.
intuitively you're like, this may have contributed to the development of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, with autoimmune, there's typically three sort of triggers essentially. So, number one, there is, potentially genetic disposition for sure. That's not always the case, but there can be. Environmental factors, so like different environmental toxins and whatnot, and then gut health. So there could be, underlying viral bacterial infections that are going on there. And so I pretty much had all three. So, I mean, my mother and my grandmother, all my cousins, my female cousins on my mother's side of my family, all have autoimmune.
Wow.
All of them. Yes. So there's definitely a genetic disposition there for sure. And then environmentally, well, I mean, I guess this kind of does go hand in hand with gut health, is that I did catch a parasite in my early 20s on vacation. And I don't think that was ever properly healed or dealt with. And so I did do some medical intervention for that, as well as some, natural intervention. And I just don't think at that time I really understood and took it seriously. Right. And so so that for sure. But then also looking back at, birth control use, right? The birth control, it's a pharmaceutical. It's going to disrupt bacteria in your gut, and you have healthy bacteria in there that actually help support thyroid hormone conversion and different minerals and vitamins, and just overall hormonal health. Looking back to when I was little, like my parents did what they knew best. And so when I was sick, if they would take me to the doctor, or I'd go on an antibiotic or something, right? And that happened numerous times. And so it's just this onslaught that your body takes over the years of being exposed to environmental triggers, potentially eating certain foods that could be a trigger for you, taking, different antibiotics and different pharmaceuticals over the year. Like it's all just like these little hits to your gut and to your immune system. And then basically you are stressed, right? And then, you're going through lots of stress, and it's just this perfect storm for it all to kind of show its face. And so even though I was diagnosed with it in 2017, it was definitely sort of, I guess you could say, dormant for like many, many years before that. I'm sure it was, probably very prevalent in my early 20s, maybe even my teens, but those symptoms didn't start to really show up until 2017.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow. Yeah. That's so fascinating and such a good reminder for all of us, right? That there's lots of areas that these things can kind of develop from, right? And I love that you
definitely.
definitely mentioned gut health. I mean, that's such an important piece of the puzzle, right? And obviously I can plug
Huge.
in sugar there for like how much
Yes,
damage we've all done overdosing on sugar
100%.
since we've been, 1 year old, right? Or even
Yep.
younger. All of this plays in and creates that perfect storm and environment for inflammation and these autoimmune diseases to kind of show up and start attacking. So
Yep.
what did you do? Like, this is the next, like, part
Yeah.
here is like, in 2017, when you were diagnosed, like what did you change? What did you do? And where are you now with Hashimoto's? Like, is it still something that you have or struggle with, or do you feel like you've healed through it?
Yeah. So it's very up and down, in full transparency. I mean, I've definitely gone through times where it's like been in remission, but there could be all sorts of triggers and something that can cause a flare up. So, and what I've really learned over the years, and for those who are listening who, maybe have Hashimoto's and they're kind of being on top of tracking their antibodies and whatnot, because I do recommend kind of getting those tested every, 4 to 6 months to just kind of be on top of. But what ends up happening is we get so obsessed with those numbers, and antibodies are fluctuating. They can fluctuate all of the time. You can test them today and they can be one number. You can test them tomorrow, they're going to be a different number. So, I had to really learn how to like let go of just kind of being obsessed with those numbers. I think it's important to have the data and look at it to kind of gauge where you are. But at the same time, recognizing, like I said, it's very, up and down. And at the end of the day, I think it's really important to look at like symptomatically, how are you feeling? Because if you're feeling really great and you're sleeping well and your cravings are in check and you've got great energy and, your cycle is on track, like if you are feeling well and not just well, if you're feeling great, then that's a really good sign. Like that's a great sign. Let's go by symptoms and let's not worry about the antibodies so much. Do we still want to make sure we're being conscious of it and trying to lower them? Absolutely. But everybody is so unique and so different that sometimes for some people, those antibodies, they are going to stay a little bit higher. And even during times of like pregnancy, it's natural for those antibodies to go up. That can be very common. So I just kind of want to, mention that and kind of park that to the side. But when I did get diagnosed in 2017, the biggest thing for me that I had to prioritize was sleep, because I was like, if I can't sleep, I'm not going to be able to heal and I'm going to feel exhausted and it's just going to create this nasty cycle. And so I really had to prioritize my sleep. And so that was really, really important for me, creating really healthy sleep boundaries, blackout blinds, going to bed at the same time every night and waking up at the same time during the week and on weekends. Taking my supplements at night, things like magnesium or melatonin or 5-HTP, whatever that is, right? It's going to look different for everybody, but those were some things that I started to really like just make such a priority, and really calming my body down and my nervous system in the evening. So putting the computer away, putting the phone away. I don't think we realize how big of a deal these things can make on our health. Right. And I think we instantly just want to reach for like the medication or the supplement, and it can definitely help. Don't get me wrong, but your lifestyle is so important, and it's what you're doing day to day. So I had to really be conscious of just time on the computer overall and what my workday looked like, and taking time off and slowing down. And again, creating that really important nighttime ritual. So that was really important for me. Sleep was like number one priority. And then I did do some more testing in terms of like mineral testing, and just kind of getting a nice overview of like, what do I really need to supplement with here? What is my body really depleted in? And just kind of looking at those nutrients and supplementing with that specifically. And then I have been on desiccated thyroid for quite some time. So desiccated thyroid is basically bioidentical thyroid hormone. And unlike Synthroid or levothyroxine, basically that's synthetic and it's only going to give you T4, but your body needs T4 and T3. T3 is your active thyroid hormone. And so I went on desiccated many years ago, and it definitely helped. But again, let me be clear, taking desiccated thyroid doesn't just solve or heal the underlying components of, why this all showed up in the first place. So it's not, I wasn't deficient in desiccated thyroid and now that solved everything, right? It's just one piece of a really big puzzle. So hope that kind of answers some of your question. I can always expand more on anything.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So fantastic. And I love how how you really are hitting home for everyone, right? The importance of sleep in this, right? Like, and how you knew if I'm not sleeping, my body is not healing, right? And that is so true. And it's so much easier just to take a pill, right? Like, this is why we do it. We've all been raised in this sort of mentality to just like, Band-Aid approach, right? That's how we've been taught by the pharmaceutical industry and our doctors, right? Just take this pill and it'll help you sleep, right? Versus actually setting yourself up for success and supporting yourself and properly, sleeping. And I know that that's not an easy journey. And we actually had an expert, sleep expert, my dear friend, Molly McLaughlin, on a couple episodes ago. So anyone wants to learn more about like get sleep, go and listen to that episode.
Go back to that.
Yeah. But I mean, so powerful. So thank you for sharing kind of your journey through that. And the real truth that this is an ongoing piece. I think that's really important for people to know. I mean, they see you and I here, talking and helping people in these areas, thinking we've got it all figured out. And we're still, healing and learning and adjusting with our bodies as well, and learning what works and what doesn't.
Absolutely. Right. Like, and I think it's safe to say too, like over these, past 2.5 years, like we were saying earlier, right. It's been a whirlwind. And even though like, I'm so grateful to work from home and my work was not impacted, and like, so grateful for that, we still, there's stress. Like there's still stress, feeling the weight of the world and everything that's going on and all the shifts and the changes of our day-to-day lives. And, my husband's work was impacted, family getting sick, like all of the things. So I think sometimes we undermine it. It's like, okay, we're managing day to day. Sure, I can show up and I can still go to work and still kind of have my regular routine, because I'm not fully impacted, because I don't necessarily have to leave the house to go to my job, but, there's still stress. There's still stress, like the emotional toll it takes on us, right? That psychological toll, mental, like it is a lot. And so we don't, I think, realize how sometimes these things can really set the stage for us to feel really shitty.
Well said. Yeah.
Yeah.
And be curious, like to see some sort of stats. I mean, who knows if we can trust the numbers anymore. Right. But, something on, this last, like we've all just been through a mass trauma together, right? Like the last 2 years has been a global trauma, like that, let's call it what it is. And 100%. We've all felt it in one way or another, right? The energy, the fear, like all that energy and toxicity and fear and all of that. And, I wonder, like how many, and maybe some of you listening, maybe some things have shown up for you in the last 2 years, right? Like maybe this was the perfect environment for these things like Hashimotos or other maybe autoimmune diseases or other, health issues to really rear their head, because we've been under that concoction of global stress and panic and all of that. That just came to me, and it'd be really interesting to see like how many people. So send me a message, let me know, like, did something, kind of rear its head for you in the last 2 years? Cause this is really important to understand that, we can make it through the day, but are we actually doing ourselves any good by just pushing through it, right? And this is what I talk about a lot, right? Like really honoring our emotions and learning how to process instead of just like stuffing them down with food or anything else, right? Pretending they're not there and letting that lead to disease, right? Letting that lead to these sorts of struggles and challenges, which once you get there, it's just not as easy as preventing it in the first place, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'd love to talk about the thyroid a little more, because we haven't had this conversation yet on the podcast. And maybe like, let's start off on ground zero. What is the purpose of our thyroid? We hear a lot about it, especially with women, and hyperthyroid and hypothyroid and now Hashimoto's. Like, what is the point and the role of the thyroid? And maybe speak a little to like the difference between like hyper and hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's, like all the things that can sort of be looked for and could maybe go wrong with our thyroid.
Totally. So the thyroid is this butterfly shaped gland that is basically at like the base of your neck. And it is, it's a very lovely, beautiful gland. So give it some love. And it really is what governs metabolism in our bodies. And so it's involved in all metabolic processes. And I think when many of us hear that term, metabolism, we instantly think of weight loss, fat loss. Like that's what we instantly think of. right? But metabolic health goes way beyond that. And so when I say it's governing the metabolism of your body, that means, yes, weight. Yes, that's part of the process, but it also is governing the metabolism of your ovaries. So your fertility, it's governing the metabolism of your brain. It's governing your digestion and digestive function. So often what happens is when you have low thyroid function, hypothyroidism, everything else starts to slow down, right? Because the thyroid became sluggish. So all those metabolic processes start to slow. So fertility gets impacted, digestion gets impacted, and then you start to experience more gas, bloating, constipation, right? You start to experience more brain fog, and just like your thinking process is actually slowed, right? So it's everything actually starts to slow down in the body. And that's really hypothyroid. Whereas hyper is literally the reverse. Things are speeding up. Heart rate is racing. Maybe you're sweating more. Like things are just moving a lot faster. Maybe you have more loose stools. So it could even mean like issues with your cycle and your period. Whereas, one could experience more heavier flow and one can experience a lighter flow, or more regular cycles, like more shorter cycles, because things are just moving so fast in the body. So you can go from like very short cycles in a hyper to maybe even longer cycles in a hypo. So it could be very different for everybody. The symptoms, quite frankly, are like all over the place. They really are. They're so
makes it really easy to diagnose, doesn't it?
Right? Yeah, it's true. Like they really can be quite all over the place. And, but the things that I see typically are sluggish digestion, brain fog, fatigue. Sometimes I do see issues with women's cycles for sure. The weight gain piece, hair loss, and then also cold hands and cold feet. That can really be a big one as well. Also issues with like blood sugar stability and more cravings, that can definitely, play a role as well. So your thyroid is involved in all of these different processes, from sex hormones, digestion, brain health, cardiovascular, all of it. And, your libido, your mood, it's all involved. So the thyroid, it really is such an important gland, and we really want to love and support it as much as we possibly can. But what ends up happening is that stress, our adrenals, our adrenals, we're like on some sort of level, I think it's safe to say we're all experiencing some sort of stress, right? Mm-hmm. And what happens is the stress accumulates, and we, like you said earlier, we don't have this way to like process it or deal with these emotions, and we just kind of pack it all in. And, one day, literally, it will feel like you wake up and you got hit by a Mack truck, because everything just comes, full force. And what happens is the adrenals actually communicate with your thyroid. And so when you have a lot of stress going on, your adrenals are going to be like high functioning, because they're trying to like pump out the cortisol and pump out the adrenaline and basically support you in like showing up and thinking and doing all the things that you need to do to get through your day. So you're going to be like high off of these stress hormones. And when that's high, it lowers the thyroid function. So the adrenals are high and the thyroid is low. You literally can't have both functioning at the same time. So stress is really one of the biggies when it comes to, impacting our metabolism and our thyroid function. And it will also impact our T4 and our T3 production. And then it will start to increase inflammation in the body. And it just becomes this like really nasty cycle of chronic stress, low thyroid output, sluggish metabolism, increased inflammation. And that cycle just kind of keeps going and keeps going. Wow. So no fun.
This sounds kind of important for us to pay attention to, ladies, right?
Definitely.
So what you're saying is, when our adrenals are so activated from stress, in our life, it almost like shuts down the thyroid. Mm-hmm. Right? Is that, yeah. And it just kind of, then that's not able to function, right?
100%.
Yeah, it sounds like, all the same with the digestion, right? I know that when we're stressed, like all of our blood and our energy is sent to our head to like run away, right? And our limbs and
Yep.
away from the digestion, right? When we're stress eating or not mindfully eating, right? That digestion,
Totally.
and obviously a lot, as we've sort of surmised today, right? A lot of this starts in the gut, right? Which
Yep.
is the digestion piece. So, wow, this is important. I hope everybody's really soaking this in. So what are some things that we can do to support the thyroid? Like, I think that's, to empower all of us, right?
Yes.
Number one, go get your tests. Check. Okay. Get some
For
testing
sure.
done.
Yes.
Proper testing.
Yes.
And pay for it because you are worth it.
100%.
And
yes.
What are some other things that we can start to pay attention to? Obviously, there's kind of two things here, even supporting our adrenals, supporting our thyroid. What are some things that you've seen to support?
Yeah. So like you said, testing is number one for sure. That's so important. So start there. And then adrenals and thyroid. I mean, they're so interconnected. So you really do want to support the adrenals 100%. And again, we can take supplements all day long, but we also have to address the stressors in our lives. It's really important that we start to make these lifestyle shifts. So as I'm sure you know, and have probably talked about many times, sitting in front of the TV at night and watching Netflix and drinking wine, that's not that's not how we unwind. That is not how we deal with stress. And I understand that. I get it. We're so tired and depleted at the end of the day. It's just like, we want to zone out and we want to have the wine and I get that. I totally do. But that's not going to serve you in the long term. And that's not going to bring about healing. So really addressing these lifestyle factors, whether it's work, finances, like, do you need to get support, therapy, coaching? Who's going to help you through this process? Like, start to create this team, the support team around you, so that you have these outlets that you can go to, and you have positive outlets to go to, and really work through some of these things. And it could literally just be something like, you need a vacation. You just need some time off, right? We were talking before we were recording, and I'm just like, I don't want to work. Like, and that's just in full transparency. Like, man, I really am feeling it. I'm feeling the cumulative effect of just the past few years and being at home and work. It's so easy to want to go to my work because it's right here on the computer. So if I'm stuck at home and there was nowhere to go, it was like, well, I guess I'll just work. Right. So I'm just at this point where it's like, oh my God, like I need to get out of my house. I need to step away. I need some adventure. I need to explore. My adrenals really need that. In fact, I think back to 2018 when my husband and I went to Italy for 2 weeks. And when we came back and I actually ran all my thyroid testing, they were the best numbers they had ever been. And my antibodies were at the lowest. I ate all of the things. Yes. I enjoyed myself, but it's not just that. It's really goes to show you how much having that time off, the exploration, the joy, the travel, the adventure, no computer, lots of nature, right? Enjoying food, like all of that really had such a positive impact on my labs and my thyroid hormone, and my antibodies. And so, the stress piece is so hard. And I get that. Like, I know, just saying like, oh, you got to manage your stress. Like, people are probably rolling their eyes at me right now, but it really is an important piece of the puzzle. So that's going to look different for everybody. So definitely getting that in check. And then diet wise, eliminating gluten, it is a big piece because the gluten does destroy the gut. Yes. It can impact the gut. And then you're going, and especially if you have underlying autoimmune issues, you really want to be conscious of gluten for sure. But gluten can actually attack thyroid. The gluten protein looks very similar to the thyroid. And so especially if you have autoimmune issues going on and your immune system is attacking the thyroid, it's like your immune cells are kind of going through the body and they're like, oh, well, what do we attack? What do we have to, clear out here? Oh, here's gluten, but here's this thing over here that looks like gluten. So let's just attack both. That's essentially what ends up happening. So this is why your immune system starts attacking the thyroid. And this is why you also want to minimize gluten. So it's going to be problematic for the gut, very pro-inflammatory, and then also problematic for the thyroid. So definitely cutting that out for sure. Sugar is an obvious one for sure.
Should be obvious by now, hopefully.
Yeah,
Right?
I would think so. And so sugar is going to be, really important to cut out, but not to be afraid of eating carbohydrates. It's just so many of us are reaching for things like cookies and cakes and treats and candies and overdoing it on on carbs. Like even if it is healthy carbs like quinoa or oats or buckwheat, I find that a lot of us are just very reliant on that because it's like, what's the term I want to say? It's a very, I feel like you would know the term. It's like soothing, right?
Comforting.
It's like, yeah, comforting. Exactly. Yeah. And so we reach for those things and we end up neglecting getting in enough protein, getting in enough healthy fats. So I don't want people to fear carbs. It's just eating the right kinds. So what's going to really support the thyroid is roots and fruits. So being conscious of, just getting more root vegetables in, your sweet potato, your squashes, plantain is a great option as well. And then fruits, having a couple fruits throughout the day or a little bit of berries, whatever that might look like for you, loaded with minerals, loaded with antioxidants. So fruits and roots are really the way to go when it comes to carbohydrates, and minimizing like the cookies and the cakes and the treats and the white stuff, right? So that's what we want to be conscious of. Your thyroid needs carbohydrates. So I do find that if you have some listeners right now that are intermittent fasting and they're on a low carb diet, just to be really conscious of that, because your thyroid really does need carbs. It needs the right kind of carbs and the right quantity. So again, we want to be conscious there. But if you're too low carb and you're intermittent fasting and you're not eating enough, that can be a number one thing that's going to tank your thyroid right there. So being conscious of that for sure. So I used to intermittent fast for many years. And well, it served me well until it did not. And then I really had to start honoring my body. And, I was waking up and I was hungry. I was starving in the morning and I'm like trying to suppress this and drink a black coffee. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm not doing my body, good right now. I'm neglecting these signs. And so if I'm waking up and I'm starving, I'm going to eat. Yeah. So I think it's very individual. Everybody's on their own journey, but like pay attention to what your body is telling you. Don't just try to follow some fad thing or some diet or whatever, because it seems to be the popular thing. Like you have to tune in and really do the thing that's right for you.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I so love hearing you say that. I'm like, have goosebumps as you're talking because I couldn't agree more. We get so sucked in, and I'm so fascinated that you mentioned this for your own experience around intermittent fasting, because I know that's something that I'm playing with and starting to practice. And I think, for all of us, like anything, whether it's intermittent fasting or keto or like all these things, I'm such a big proponent of try it and
totally
and really listen to your body, right? We so easily can get swept up in like, no, this is what all the gurus are telling me I need to do, versus actually listening to your own unique body. And like, for instance, when I intermittent fast, I feel amazing and I'm not hungry in the morning. Like I feel great and I feel energized and clean and like I could keep going. Like, so, I'm going to keep doing that until I don't feel good anymore.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Being willing to really pay attention I'm starting to learn and play with like my cycle with that as well. Like it's not the same all 4 weeks of the month. Right. So trying to kind of really listen to my body in that. But I love that you mentioned that. I think that's such a big message here in really learning to pay attention to what your body is telling you, because it's always talking to us. And sometimes we might need help, whether it's, with a coach, with Sam, right? Somebody to kind of help put the pieces together with like, what is my body trying to tell me, right? This is what's showing up. Like, what does it mean? And that can be really, really helpful, obviously, because it can be a bit confusing sometimes when we're not used to listening to these things. Like you knew, right? When you were at the gym, like, oh, this is Hashimotos, because you're so in tune and you've been doing this work for so long, but this takes practice and time. We've been taught to not listen to our bodies, and it's backwards, right? It's like,
it is. Yeah.
We got to come back into ourselves.
Yeah. It's really important to find that reconnection to you,
Yeah.
because you really do have the answers. You really
Yes.
do. So,
Yes.
you know, we are always looking for like the external, and it's like, let's sit and like find the, like connect with the internal, because those answers really are there. So,
Yeah.
I think it's just, we're so busy. We're so busy and we don't know how to get quiet enough to actually hear those responses that our body's trying to tell us.
Yes. I was just going to ask you, like, well, how do you think we access that? Cause
Yeah.
that's exactly what I would say as well. Like, and coming back to you even mentioning about your time in Italy, it's funny. I use that as an example a lot because I don't know if you had this experience when you were there, right? But the Italians know how to relax. They don't work for 3
Totally.
hours in the afternoon. You're like, I need lunch and everything's closed. Like,
Yep.
where is everybody between 12 and 3? Like, what's
It's
happening?
so true. It's so
Yeah. And
true.
just sitting out and enjoying, like, time with friends and talking. And most of us have been raised in this go, go, go society. And I couldn't agree more. Like, a big part of my journey and what I really coach a lot of my clients through is learning to slow down, learning not to. And I just posted about this the other day, actually, on the grams, on the Instagram,
Yep.
about like really honoring that we don't have to earn the right to slow down, right? I think there's just so much tied into like feeling like
Totally.
we deserve a break, or we have to like work
Yep.
really hard before we're allowed to take a break,
Yep.
versus my body is really tired and I kind of need to have a lazy week this week and I don't really want to work, and I'm going to honor that and not
Yep.
overthink it, and also not make it mean anything about me. I mean, I'm just
Yes.
so fascinated about
Oh
how
my
much
God. I love it. Yeah.
we tie our worth, right? Like, if I'm lazy and don't do a lot of work this week, then I'm worthless and I'm lazy, and whatever other stories that we're kind of labeling ourselves with. And it's so
Yep.
toxic.
It
And it's
is
why we're
so
getting
toxic.
sick.
Yeah, it's so true. And you know what? Like, we don't realize how that internal dialogue is such a stressor.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, like if you're, I used, and like, this is something I'm totally working through myself, is just like managing that internal dialogue of, if I just want to sit here and eat my lunch, watch an episode of Friends, it doesn't mean I'm lazy. But then like my brain is just so busy, and it's like, oh, but you should send this email and you should do this. And then like, I find I'm eating my lunch and then I'm stopping and I'm like, oh yeah, let me do this one thing over here. And then it's like, oh my God, like I can't even just sit still for 30 minutes and focus on this one damn thing, And it's like, that's a stressor.
Yeah.
That is an internal, like what that will do internally is going to create metabolic chaos for you. And so it's not just the bills and the finances and the workload and, family and kids and all those things. Absolutely. Those can be stressors, but it's what's going on internally. What's the internal message, that your story that you're telling yourself every day, like that is exhausting. It's exhausting. And so I know that as an entrepreneur, and I'm sure you've experienced too, it's just like, yeah, I'm the one that manages my schedule. So I have to be conscious of like not overdoing it. And if I do want to take time off, it doesn't mean I'm lazy, or it doesn't mean my business is going to fall apart. Like it is okay to slow down. It is okay to rest. And in turn, I actually get to show up that much more powerfully for my community and for my team. And, versus just trying to push through it all and like wear it as this badge of honor of like, oh, I could work 14-hour days or 12-hour, like, yeah.
Like, it's tied into our, like, your definition of success, right? And how it makes us feel. And I love asking this question around that, right? Like, anybody resonating with this, because I know most people do, right? We're all in this, and I'm still working on unpatterning that. Those things still show up for me. The shoulds, right? I should be doing something right now. I should be working, right? I should be like, oh my goodness, like yesterday, it was Wednesday. I try to take the days off on Wednesday, and I wasn't perfect yesterday because there was some things that needed to be done, but it's so fascinating. Just kind of like, it's Wednesday, I should be working, right? Like, what if people need me? And yeah, it's so incredible to just start being aware of that, and checking in, anybody listening, right? Just checking in with the last years or decades of your life of being busy and doing all the things. How's it working for you? Right? Like, getting really honest with that question. Like, look at our society, right? And look at the people running in the rat race, which we've all done because it's just how our society trains us to be, right? But is it working? And maybe for you it is. I don't know. I have never met somebody that's actually working for,
right.
But I'm open to that. I'm sure it exists. Maybe there's somebody out there superhuman.
Yeah.
But really, like, getting honest with that question can be, you know, really eye-opening. And then knowing that there is a way to slow down and still feel amazing and be successful. And actually you'll feel even more amazing and be even more successful 100%. If you redefine that, right? For you.
Yep.
Absolutely. I love this tangent. This is so,
I love it.
So
I love it. It's such an important conversation. And it's like the hardest thing to do. It's the hardest thing to implement. You know, it's years of conditioning, and to make it a priority to work through that, like, it's hard work, and we can't do it alone.
Yeah. Yes.
That's so really important. We can't figure this stuff out on our own. We can't heal these patterns and these stories on our own or reading a book.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. Like, as I'm sure you've known, like, you've gone through it yourself, right? Like, sure, I read many books and listen to many podcasts, but to really get to the nitty-gritty of it and heal this internal dialogue and the stories or any traumas or anything, you need to work with a professional that's going to really help you uncover it and allow you, because you can't see your own blind spots.
Yes.
You need somebody else there to really point those out to you. So
yeah, I was just going to mention that, right? We all have our blinders on. I do, you do, everybody listening, we all have our blinders on, and we need people in our lives. Like, I have a whole team, and I have for like the last 6 years. I've had mentors and coaches and therapists and shamans and different guides in different areas, and my group of friends, like, really different support for different things that have been monumental in, like, helping me see things different and helping me really guide me through, you know, healing, especially when it comes to trauma. I mean, there's so much to know around the nervous system and around, like, actually being guided through clearing out those things.
Totally.
Is not something we can do alone. We need that human connection and somebody else there to kind of shake that stuff, right? And help us through that. So I'm really glad you mentioned it, because again, we also idolize being strong, confident women who can do everything on our own.
Yes.
And it is so backwards, because we are killing ourselves by doing that, and ruining our mental health and binging on sugar because of it. And it's just, something needs to change.
Totally. I totally agree. There was
this is a whole nother podcast episode.
I know, we totally can go down a whole another path here. There was this really funny quote that I read the other day. It wasn't really a quote. It was just the saying, you know, this girl said something like, I'm totally going to butcher it, but with something along the lines of, like, who cares about being a girl boss? I'd rather be a girl moss, which is like lying in the forest and, like, reconnecting back to nature or something like that. And I was like, oh yes, I want to be a girl moss.
Oh, that's so good. Okay, let's go find some moss.
Yeah. I was like, I love that so much, but, like, just that, it's that reconnection part. Right. And nature is so powerful for that. And so, I read that and I was like, oh yeah, this resonates so deeply right now.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Well, let that be a message for all of you as well. Go out and connect with the moss.
Yes.
And the nature, even if you live in a city. Yeah. Be a girl moss, and be like, it does take a sense of, like, you know, being brave and bold to actually challenge the status quo in slowing down.
Yes.
Right. I know I've been met a lot with that. Like, what do you mean you're not working today? Or what do you mean you haven't done much this week? Like, there's going to be a lot of people, like, very confused by you slowing down, and very inconvenienced by you not doing everything anymore. And it does take a level of, like, commitment to your health and healing, right? To be able to be bold and be different. I mean, I'm totally cool being the weird one in my family, with my friends. I'm always doing strange things. Like, what's Danny doing over there, setting that boundary? What?
Totally. Yeah.
And you have to be willing to do that. Right. And ultimately coming from that place of knowing that you're worth that, right? And you're worthy. And you know, and all of these things we've talked about today, really, you know, looking after yourself and doing the right testing and being curious to listen to your body. I mean, this is all the journey that we're all on. And I'm so grateful for everything you shared today, Sam. And I want to be respectful of your time, because we can totally keep talking for hours.
We totally could.
we'll definitely have you back on the podcast. But for now, where can everybody come and find more about you online and come and listen to your podcast and everything else that you're up to?
Yeah. So I do have a podcast called Wellness Witch Podcast. So you can tune into that. And you can also find me on Instagram at Holistic Wellness Foodie. I was hoping to get the Wellness Witch handle, but it's taken, unfortunately. Yeah, I've had Holistic Wellness Foodie for so many years now. So you can follow me there, and my website, holisticwellness.ca.
Amazing. Amazing. Oh, thank you so much, Sam, for sharing.
Thank
I learned a
you.
lot from you today. I just love chatting with
Amazing.
you. And
Thank you. My pleasure.
yeah, I really appreciate everything that you've been through and everything that you're continuing to go through and share with the world. It's really, really inspiring. And yeah, I'm just so grateful to have you in my corner as well. You've been on my team in the past, my support team. And yeah, just really, really grateful for everything that you're doing and for sharing that with the audience today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Hopefully you got a lot out of that as well. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. If you're loving what we talked about today, please remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone you love. And if you're ready to dive deeper into discovering your root causes and patterns that are keeping you hooked on sugar, be sure to check out our brand new free workshop series that will help you kick emotional eating for good. Find the link to download this free series and other amazing resources in the show notes below.